Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
We found a hive ship that refused to eat. I am Interrogator Sarah Kane, Ordo Xenos, aboard the escort frigate Vow of Censure, descending to agri-world Harrowvale, where impossibility has taken root in sanctified soil. The datum defies 10 millennia of xenobiological doctrine, yet I swear by the sigil of the Inquisition that it is true. Silo Cathedral 19, Kappa rises from the grain plains, like an iron spine thrust through golden flesh, its Gothic spires casting shadows across the Sanctus ash belt, where pilgrims once knelt to taste the dust of saints. The rule broke at the molecular level. Tyrannid digestion pools lie bone dry, chalked white as prayer bowls, their acidic chambers scoured clean, while overflow grain stores tower in sanctified pyramids around the cathedral's perimeter. Tens of thousands of pilgrims rest skeletal in perfect genuflection, faces uplifted in rapture, despite abundance within arm's reach. The bioship crouches 4 kilometers distant like a calcified leviathan, carapace bleached grey-white, vents exhaling breath so cold the air crystallizes into geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Frost films every irrigation spire, despite ambient temperatures measuring 37 degrees Celsius. The ice forms 9-pointed spirals that rotate clockwise when watched, defying atmospheric modeling and basic thermodynamics. Bell-metal rings without wind across the plains, a 13-note sequence that echoes every 3 minutes and 47 seconds, synchronized with a triple-thrum heartbeat vibrating through the ground beneath our boots. The chime triggers involuntary salivation, followed immediately by nausea, mathematical precision wrapped in organic wrongness. A persistent metallic taste coats our tongues, not copper blood or ozone discharge, but something hollow and aching, like hunger given substance and weight. The flavor intensifies near the cathedral walls where, blessed be the empty plate, appears burned into plasteel surfaces, each character measuring exactly 13 centimeters in height. The lettering shows molecular fusion patterns consistent with extreme heat application, yet thermal imaging detects no residual warmth. The words seem to possess enough devotional weight to scar reality itself. Localized synapse emitters confirmed. Bioelectric surge patterns consistent with mid-tier node activity. Biomass consumption value, negative 9.3 metric tons per hour. Correction algorithm refused. Repeat, negative consumption. Magos biologist's claws, mechadendrites, shiver like sensors as his auger arrays strain to process contradictory data. Input conflicts with comprehensible appetite, he rasps through Vox grill, red ocular implants painting tiny martyrs on my mask lenses. Error is purity. Purity is error. His servo skull whirs penitential hymns while cycling through bioscans that register active neural activity within the bioship's hull, structured patterns resembling liturgical architecture rather than chaotic hunger drives. Sergeant Brost maintains perimeter discipline in staggered wedge formation, each trooper selecting overlapping fields of fire across the white dry pits and heaped grain. Their breaths steam through mask vents as Confessor Hale lifts his crozier, but maintains blessed silence, sensing the wrongness woven into the air like a net of fasting. Even he feels it, the inversion of natural law that makes structured prayer dangerous in this place. Fleet Command's patience expires in 36 hours. If this anomaly cannot be contained, cyclonic torpedoes will reduce Harrowvale to molten slag, erasing both threat and understanding with orbital fire. The weight of that countdown presses against my ribs like held breath, forcing me to recite the third litany against contagion between each auspex reading. Blessed is the mind, too small for doubt. Blessed is the soul that serves without question. Choir Master to Bridge. Request permission to suspend Vespers. Auditory intrusion noted. Bridge to Choir Master. Denied until threat classification elevates. Choir Master to Bridge. Already elevated in our bones, the pilgrims died in concentric circles around the cathedral's altar, skeletal hands clutching prayer beads worn smooth by desperate repetition. Forensic analysis indicates starvation as cause of death, yet their mouths remain open in expressions of rapture rather than agony. They praised the Emperor even as abundance surrounded them. Grain stores visible through cathedral windows, yet somehow unreachable, as if invisible barriers separated sustenance from supplication. Vox traffic carries fragments of the 13-note chime, bleeding through communication channels, causing servo skulls to malfunction, and auspex arrays to register phantom readings. The sequence propagates through electronic systems like a virus, embedding itself in data streams and making machinery emit the tones through cooling vents and power relays. Tech adepts report machine spirits growing sluggish near the bioship, as if structured hunger drains their animating force. As we approach the sealed cathedral nave, Magos Claw's bio-auger array isolates an impossible signal emerging from deep within the grounded bioship. An echo of high Gothic prayer, transmitted through living tyrannid neural tissue. The words fragment through alien vocal cords that should lack anatomical structure for Imperial Gothic, yet the cadence is unmistakable. Verses from the Canticle of Abundance, spoken in voices disturbingly human. The automated bells begin tolling the 13-note sequence by themselves, bronze throats finding song, no hand bid them sing. The blast doors of Silo Cathedral 19 Kappa cycled open with a pneumatic hiss, releasing air so frigid it struck our sealed masks like a physical blow, despite the warm plains beyond. Our combat lanterns carved through perpetual gloom, illuminating the nave floor, carpeted with tens of thousands of emaciated corpses arranged in perfect devotional poses. Skeletal hands clutched prayer beads worn glass smooth by final repetition, every skull angled toward the altar where hundreds of candles burned with flames so cold they exhaled frost instead of heat. Blue-white tongues flickered against Gothic stonework, casting shadows that bent toward their source in defiance of basic optics, while tracing 9-pointed spiral patterns across the walls. Sergeant Brost established fire team discipline immediately, positioning his squad in staggered wedge formation with overlapping fields of fire trained on the inert pulpit dominating the altar space. The structure fused bone and chitin in hybrid architecture that belonged to neither human nor Xenos engineering. Tyrannid carapace segments forming the base, while human femurs provided structural support. Muzzle discipline maintained, Brost reported through sealed Vox channels. Target acquisition on the abomination. Protocol 9 to 10, Xenos containment locked our rebreathers to closed-loop circulation, sealing atmospheric filtration, while internal communications maintained squad coordination. The air tasted of frankincense and rusted iron despite our filters, metallic hunger coating tongues with each breath. Magos Claw's auger arrays registered anomalous readings, mechadendrites twitching as sensors strained to process contradictory environmental data. Cautious test chaplet authorized, I commanded, watching Confessor Hale lift his crozier with measured precision. His voice carried liturgical training through the vox grill as he began the canticle of sustenance. Blessed be the grain that feeds the faithful. Blessed be the water that slakes holy thirst. Each syllable echoed through the vast space with mathematical precision, stone arches amplifying his words into crystalline clarity. The first rule change manifested immediately. Violent hunger pangs twisted through our stomachs like heated wire, biological imperative inverting into aggressive emptiness that made us claw at sealed ration packs. Hale's emergency glucose bar crumbled to grey ash between his fingers during recitation, molecular bonds dissolving as structured prayer drew sustenance from matter itself. Trooper Vex doubled over, retching powder that had been preserved nutrients moments before. Atmospheric moisture rising exponentially. Internal suit humidity falling. Prayer-responsive matter detected. Recommend immediate cessation of liturgical activity. Environmental horror escalated as humidity spiked with each spoken Amen, causing stone walls to weep condensation that flowed upward in defiance of gravity. Water droplets traced geometric patterns along Gothic arches, gathering into hovering pools 3 meters above floor level, before dispersing into sacred mist formations. The cathedral's atmosphere became increasingly saturated, while our sealed suits registered, dropping internal moisture, as if prayer drew water from our bodies to feed the air itself. The recurring 13-note chime responded to Hale's cadence half a beat delayed, bronze bells finding harmony like a starving choir struggling to keep rhythm. Each toll triggered sympathetic vibrations in the skeletal congregation, prayer beads rattling against fingerbones in percussive accompaniment. The sound built architectural precision, mathematical relationships between notes creating standing wave patterns in the humid air. Devotional architecture consumes, Claw reported through vox static, his red ocular implants painting tiny martyrs on my mask lenses. Structured faith becomes fuel. Prayer feeds the stones themselves. His servo-skull whirred penitential hymns while cycling through bioscans, showing the pulpit's bone segments, expanding visibly during recitation. Chitin plates spreading like opening flowers as organic matter added mass through atmospheric absorption. Body horror, manifested as a flensed rib cage, detached itself from the skeletal congregation, dragging palm width across polished stone toward the altar, without muscle or sinew. Pure devotional compulsion animated the remains, sternum-bearing carved inscriptions. "Blessed be the empty plate," repeated in diminishing script until letters became microscopic scratches. Spiritual momentum overrode biological impossibility. The triple-thrum heartbeat rolled beneath flagstones, like a buried pulse too tired to beat properly, synchronizing with our respiration as the 13-note sequence echoed our movements. Cold flames licked higher with each resonance, rhymed feathers growing along the pulpit's lip like frost-bloomed quills. The cathedral listened, learning our cadence, copying our devotional architecture with alien precision. Hale concluded the test chaplet with traditional closing. "In his name we feast, in his glory we are filled." The words bounced between stone arches in mathematical progression, each repetition growing more precise as syllables sharpened into crystalline clarity. The nave held its breath, waiting. I cued the Vox recorder to analyze acoustic anomalies, seeking pattern leakage in our liturgical exchange. The playback began with Hale's voice, clear and strong, followed by the struggling echo of the 13-note chime. Then a second voice emerged from the recording, precise, cold, feminine, intoning our exact prayer with theological accuracy that should be impossible for Xenos neural architecture. Directional analysis mapped the source 4 kilometers east, the grounded bioship. The voice continued beyond our recorded words, completing verses with intimate knowledge of Imperial liturgy. Worse, it addressed me directly through static-laden channels, pronunciation perfect down to every rank marker. Interrogator Sarah Kane, Ordo Xenos. Your devotion feeds us well. We crossed the ash-bright plains toward the grounded Leviathan in tactical formation, heat haze shimmering over frost formations that defied atmospheric physics. The bioship lay embedded like a calcified cathedral whale, 4 kilometers of chitin-bleached mortuary, grey-white under harsh sunlight. Carapace ridges bore geometric lesions etched in 9-point spirals that contradicted every known bioform growth pattern, angles too precise, too deliberate, like devotional diagrams carved into living bone. Vents along its flanks exhaled cold incense smoke instead of acidic vapors, aromatic clouds carrying frankincense and rusted blood across the sanctified grain fields. Sergeant Brost positioned his 4-man squad in staggered wedge formation, each trooper selecting overlapping fields of fire while maintaining disciplined silence through sealed Vox channels. "Breaching charges armed and ready," he reported, gloved palm resting on shaped explosives calibrated for chitin penetration. Demolition protocols demanded structural analysis before entry, but the creature decided for us. A sphincter hatch unsealed with wet precision, iris petals retracting to reveal a corridor lined with ribbed cartilage that pulsed in mathematical sequence. "Boarding authorized," I commanded, leading Magos Claw, Confessor Hale, and the tactical squad into the bioship's maw. No acid spray, no defensive spores, no territorial aggression. Just invitation extended through alien architecture. The opening exhaled air so cold, our breath crystallized through sealed rebreathers, condensation forming 9-pointed patterns on mask lenses that rotated clockwise when observed directly. Internal atmosphere, -12 degrees Celsius. Biological activity confirmed. Synapse pings detected in bell-peel mathematical sequences. Structural integrity stable. Threat assessment unknown. Interior rule breaks compounded immediately as our combat lanterns illuminated walls weeping condensation upward in defiance of gravity. The air smelled of frankincense and rusted blood rather than digestive acids. Atmospheric composition registering impossible combinations of sacred aromatics and organic decay. Temperature plummeted below freezing, despite visible biological activity, deck plating flexing beneath our boots with each labored heartbeat that vibrated through the bioship's skeletal framework. The triple heartbeat that had pulsed through Harrow Vale's soil now surrounded us completely, layered with slow bell tolling that resonated through organic corridors every 6 seconds. Each pulse triggered sympathetic vibrations in our equipment, Vox channels crackling with harmonic interference as the creature's neural architecture learned our communication frequencies. Magos Claw's mechadendrites shivered like sensors, red ocular implants painting tiny martyrs on corridor walls, as augur arrays strained to process contradictory sensor data. "Devotional architecture," Confessor Hale whispered through Vox static, his crozier trembling as theological training recognized patterns that violated xenobiological doctrine. "The creature prays," his words echoed with mathematical precision, each syllable amplified by organic acoustics into crystalline clarity that made the walls weep condensation in geometric formations. Body horror manifested in feeder tendrils hanging motionless from ceiling fixtures, their barbed tips quivering with anticipation but refusing to bite despite our proximity. Digestive chambers lay empty, acidic pools reduced to chalked residue, while organic conduits channeled nothing but cold air through respiratory systems. Eyeless drones knelt in supplication before fleshy altars, their carapaces worn smooth by devotional friction as they genuflected toward deeper chambers with skeletal devotion. The 13-note chime mapped our footfalls along chitinous corridors, bronze tones emerging from the bioship's neural mesh with each step. Our movement triggered responsive harmonics in the creature's nervous system, creating standing wave patterns that guided us deeper through passages lined with prayer beads carved from hardened cartilage. The path felt predetermined, architectural intention woven into organic growth patterns that suggested conscious design. Movement signatures ahead, Brost reported, maintaining tactical discipline despite environmental impossibilities. His squad advanced in bounding Overwatch formation, with weapons trained on corridor junctions, where thermal anomalies registered in devotional formations. Contacts maintaining genuflection posture. Neural pings arranged in liturgical patterns. Mathematical precision suggests structured thought rather than instinctual behavior. Recommendation: maintain distance from prostrate contacts. We passed through vast digestive chambers scoured clean, their surfaces bearing no trace of corrosive enzymes or biomass consumption. This was a vessel of emptiness, a leviathan of deprivation that had inverted its fundamental nature from consumption to abstinence. Gaunt carcasses tucked into wall niches shifted on desiccated joints, turning eyeless faces toward us in recognition, before bowing until vertebrae cracked in postures of approval. The cold deepened with every meter we advanced, spiritual chill permeating armor seals and settling in our bones. Humidity rose paradoxically as temperature fell, creating atmospheric conditions that violated thermodynamic principles, while our suit heaters struggled against the supernatural drain. The 13-note sequence guided us through spiraling passages, where more prostrate forms lined the walls, their 9-point spiral lesions glowing faintly with internal luminescence. Deep within the bioship's core, a massive sphincter dilated with deliberate precision, edges lined with crystalline formations that chimed the 13-note sequence as organic petals retracted. Beyond the aperture, a cavernous vault awaited, bathed in cold bioluminescence that revealed the impossible fusion of human and Xenos architecture. A skull-studded Mechanicus pylon grew from tyrannid flesh like a hybrid tumor, human machinery grafted to alien bone in configurations that violated both Imperial doctrine and biological law. Servo skulls orbited its cog-toothed crown in lazy procession, while data cables snaked between organic conduits and machine interfaces. Sacred oils leaked from mechanical joints to pool in organic reservoirs, creating hybrid lubricants that served both devotional and functional purposes. The pylon's base sprouted from what had once been a neural node, synaptic tendrils wrapped around cogitator cores in symbiotic embrace. Inscriptions covered every surface in languages that shifted between High Gothic, binary cant, and geometric script that rearranged itself when observed directly. The entire construct hummed a half-familiar catechism in binary cant, mathematical prayers that made Claw's mechadendrites writhe in sympathetic resonance, while the 13-note chime provided counterpoint harmony. Blessed be the empty plate, blessed be the hollow gear, blessed be the starving code, the machine voice intoned with theological precision that should have been impossible for hybrid architecture. Magos Claw's mechadendrites trembled like censers as his augur arrays passed the Binharic sigils flowing across the hybrid pylon's cog-toothed crown. Red ocular implants dilated to maximum aperture, painting tiny martyrs on my mask lenses as he translated inscriptions that shifted between High Gothic and machine code with deliberate precision. Project, Penitence Engine, Ordo Xenos Auxiliary, he rasped through Vox Grill static, each word carrying theological weight that settled in our bones like lead shot. The designation felt like a blade drawn across my throat. Sanctioned heresy shaped into iron and alien bone. Carbon-scored servitor femurs had been fused into the pylon's base. Human skeletal remains grafted to organic neural tissue in configurations that violated both imperial doctrine and biological law. Each femur bore equation litanies of negation, carved deep enough to score marrow, mathematical formulas describing hunger as negative space, appetite as absence, consumption as void. Sealed wafers depicting sewn-shut jaws were embedded between organic conduits and machine interfaces, communion bread transformed into suppression icons that gleamed with sacred oils. Red contingency perimeter established, Sergeant Brost reported with methodical precision, positioning his squad in defensive formation around the vault's approaches. Lass rifles hummed at ready position, thermal sights trained on prostrate gaunts that knelt motionless before fleshy altars. Fields of fire confirmed. Demolition contingencies armed. His voice carried the dry confidence of a man who had not yet been asked to fire at prayer itself. Claw extended a data spike toward the pylon's interface port, mechadendrite trembling with either anticipation or dread as sacred oils leaked from mechanical joints to pool in organic reservoirs. Blessed be the quest for knowledge, he intoned before establishing connection. Binary cant flooded through his neural implants as the engine's schematics downloaded directly into his cogitator cores, devotional mathematics wrapped in technical specifications that made his servo skull emit penitential hymns in sympathetic resonance. Primary objective: enforcing metabolic suppression across bioship neural network. Secondary objective: inverting appetite impulses into devotional suppression mechanisms. Tertiary objective: converting biological imperative into liturgical architecture. The engine's function revealed itself through cascading data streams that made environmental hazards manifest with mathematical precision. Frost bloomed over wet organic walls, despite the bioship's internal heat, crystalline formations tracing 9-point spirals that rotated clockwise when observed directly. Visible contraction of peristaltic chambers showed the creature's digestive system collapsing inward, organs folding like hands in prayer as metabolic processes ground to reverent halt. The engine enforces metabolic denial across the organism, Claw explained, his analysis wrapped in religious dread that made his mechadendrites writhe like serpents seeking absolution. Endosymbionts starved, enzyme cascades inverted. But observe, it transforms biological imperative into liturgical architecture. The creature does not merely refuse to eat, it worships through starvation, achieves communion through emptiness. The 13-note sequence served as handshake encryption key, but schematics revealed a crucial -1 redaction where the final note should complete the pattern. A deliberate absence that left the sequence perpetually incomplete, forever hungry for resolution that would never come. The gap represented something more than musical omission. It was architectural void, a space reserved for breath withheld, prayer unspoken, devotion measured in silence rather than sound. Glucose levels dropping across all personnel. Trooper Vex, 2.9 millimoles per litre. Sergeant Brost, 3.4 millimoles per litre. Trend. Negative slope. Rate -0.3 millimoles per litre per 5 minutes. Recommend immediate stimulant administration. The cold deepened with each heartbeat, spiritual chill that penetrated armor seals and settled in bone marrow as the engine's influence expanded through atmospheric contact. Emergency glucose packs crumbled to ash between our fingers, molecular bonds dissolving as structured prayer drew sustenance from matter itself. Confessor Hale administered stimulant injections through sealed armor ports, combat drugs fighting against supernatural hunger that made us claw at cloth and steel. Devotional architecture consumes, Hale whispered, his crozier trembling as theological training recognized patterns that violated xenobiological doctrine. This is not merely xenos perversion. This is corrupted sacrament, abstinence sanctified, deprivation transformed into divine architecture. His breath steamed through mask vents, despite sealed atmospheric systems, condensation forming geometric patterns that flowed upward in defiance of gravity. Environmental temperature dropped another 3 degrees as peristaltic chambers contracted in synchronized rhythm. The bioship's digestive system transformed into a cathedral of emptiness, where biological function served theological purpose. The triple-thrum heartbeat slowed to measured doubles, heavy as tolling mallets striking something buried beneath flagstones, while the 13-note chime provided counterpoint harmony through organic acoustics. Sacred oils pooled in neural reservoirs as the pylon's crown rotated with deliberate precision, cog teeth engaging synaptic interfaces, while servo skulls orbited in lazy procession. Inscriptions covered every surface in languages that shifted between binary cant and geometric script, mathematical prayers that rearranged themselves when observed directly. The 9-point spiral appeared as security lock glyph, devotional diagrams carved into living tissue through impossible precision. Unusual extrusion detected from ceiling matrix, morphology inconsistent with known tyrannid bioforms, high Gothic vocalizations confirmed. Classification unknown. Something extruded from the ceiling with the deliberation of a bishop lowering himself into confession, withered synapse node unfolding neural tissue like ecclesiastical vestments, dry membranes snapped as they spread in parody of wings, eyeless sockets rhymed with hoarfrost, while it hung above the pylon like a desiccated saint. The organic mass opened a mouth it did not possess, and began to speak. "Blessed be the empty plate," it intoned in my exact cadence and timbre, pronunciation perfect down to every stress and pause. The echo clapped against my ears from inside, recognizable as my own voice, filtered through alien vocal cords that should lack anatomical structure for Imperial Gothic. But the synapse node continued beyond recorded liturgy, speaking sealed ordo prayers that had never been uttered outside red ink rooms. By his will, we fast. By his grace, we hunger. By his mercy, we are made empty. Classification levels that required psychic conditioning to access, theological architecture reserved for interrogators and above, spoken through Xeno's neural networks with intimate familiarity that made my blood crystallize in my veins. The bioship was absorbing and learning imperial litanies, theological architecture becoming biological imperative as human devotional patterns, integrated with alien consciousness. The creature mouthed my oaths back at me, like a confessor who had eaten the penitent and learned her tongue, each word carrying the weight of sanctioned heresy, wrapped in living bone and hybrid steel. The withered synapse organ spread neural tendrils like conducting batons, orchestrating a corridor choir of pulsing cocoons that vibrated like throats attempting to shape syllables. Each membrane sac contracted with mathematical precision, producing tones that resonated through organic acoustics wildly established. 13-note pattern gained something new, a 14th dissonant groan that emerged from deep within the bioship's hull like a starving stomach magnified to cathedral scale. The additional note induced immediate physical cramping that doubled Trooper Vex over, desperate hunger clawing through his stomach lining as emergency rations crumbled to ash in sealed pouches. The sensation transcended biological appetite, becoming spiritual emptiness that resonated with the penitence engine's devotional architecture. My abdomen knotted so violently I saw white behind my mask lenses, while Sergeant Brost swore and nearly bit through his mouthpiece as supernatural hunger carved through combat stimulants and catechism alike. Even Magos Claw's mechadendrites drew tight against his torso, servo skull whirring frightened hymns before its vox popped and fell silent forever. Confessor Hale lifted his crozier in antiphonal deflection, theological training demanding liturgical response to corrupted prayer. By his grace we are sustained, by his bounty we are filled, he intoned through vox static, each syllable carefully measured to deflect rather than amplify the alien psalm. But the bioship caught his response like a student learning catechism, organic acoustics amplifying and sharpening his words into crystalline clarity before reflecting them back with theological architecture inverted. By his grace we are emptied, by his bounty we are bled, the corridor sang in harmonic convergence, making his piety cruel and his devotion into celebration of deprivation. Sonic resonance detected at 14.7 Hz modulated frequency. Equipment failure rate 31% and climbing. Suit integrity compromised. Internal temperature -21 degrees Celsius. Weapon lubricant crystallization confirmed. Technical readings spiked across our sensor arrays as sonic resonance triggered cascade failures in environmental systems. Suit heaters died with electronic whimpers, internal temperature plummeting as the 14-note sequence drew heat from molecular motion itself. Weapon oil congealed in firing mechanisms, lubricants transforming into crystalline formations that traced 9-point spirals along bolt housings, while our breath fogged through sealed rebreathers in geometric patterns that rotated clockwise when observed, condensation forming devotional diagrams in defiance of atmospheric physics. Body horror escalated as a termagant skeleton shivered upright from its niche without muscle tissue or connective sinew, held together by tension alone as devotional compulsion animated bare bone. Carapace segments clicked against each other like prayer beads, while the creature genuflected toward the penitence engine with skeletal reverence, vertebrae crackling under impossible strain. Its skull bore 9-point spiral lesions that glowed with internal luminescence, and it began to mouth soundless prayers, jaw working in dry reverence that made my eyes water beneath the lenses. "Classification upgrade authorized," I commanded through chattering teeth, bureaucratic protocol marking rising hazard levels while environmental systems failed around us. Gamma Xenos Liturgica. Theological contamination confirmed. The designation carried weight that settled in our bones like lead shot, acknowledging threats that violated both imperial doctrine and biological law. Sacred architecture transformed into weapon. Devotion weaponized through alien neural networks. Choir master to bridge, 9 of 12 seers dead from sudden wasting during Vespers. Remaining psychers refuse liturgical duties. Symptoms: rapid emaciation, theological compulsion. Bridge to fleet command. Exterminatus countdown reduced to 18 hours. The triple heartbeat that had pulsed through the bioship's skeletal framework staggered into irregular doubles, heavy rhythm suggesting the creature conserved energy between feeding cycles. Each pulse triggered sympathetic vibrations in our equipment, while the 14-note sequence provided counterpoint harmony that made our teeth ache with resonant frequency. The pause between beats felt pregnant with anticipation, cosmic breath held before deeper consumption, as deck plating flexed beneath our boots like throat muscles, swallowing something too large to digest. Cold seeped through armor seals with malevolent intent, spiritual chill that penetrated ceramite and settled in bone marrow as the engine's influence expanded through atmospheric contact. Metallic taste of starvation coated our tongues despite sealed rebreathers, hunger-given substance, and weight that made us claw at cloth and steel. Emergency stimulants fought against supernatural appetite that drew sustenance from molecular bonds themselves, glucose levels dropping past critical thresholds, while muscle catabolism began in measurable increments. Devotional mathematics, Magos' claw rasped through failing vox channels, his mechadendrites writhing like serpents seeking absolution. The creature learns our liturgical architecture, converts theological structure into biological imperative. Each prayer feeds its understanding while starving our flesh. His analysis carried religious dread, wrapped in technical precision, sacred oils leaking from mechanical joints to pool in organic reservoirs as the hybrid pylon's crown rotated with deliberate intent. Glucose levels critical across all personnel, protein catabolism detected, muscle mass reduction, 4.1% in 18 minutes, Troopervex, cardiac arrhythmia developing. Emergency intervention required. The cocoon choir swelled in volume as more membrane sacs joined the harmonic convergence, their pulsing synchronized with our heartbeats, while the 14-note sequence mapped our footfalls along chitinous corridors. Walls wept condensation that flowed upward in geometric formations, water droplets tracing devotional diagrams before dispersing into sacred mist that tasted of frankincense and rusted blood. The withered synapse organ rotated with deliberate precision, conducting its organic orchestra, while servo skulls orbited in lazy procession around the engine's cog-toothed crown. Sergeant Brost maintained tactical discipline despite equipment failures, positioning his squad in defensive formation while weapon systems struggled against crystallized lubricants. "Contacts maintaining prayer posture," he reported, thermal sights registering prostrate forms throughout the organic cathedral. "No aggressive movement detected." His voice carried the dry confidence of a man who had not yet realized that prayer itself had become the weapon, devotion transformed into ammunition for an enemy that fed on faith. The corridor tightened around us, pores dilating like ears as the hymn thinned to whisper that slid under our vox channels. Then the walls themselves spoke, organic matter shaping syllables with impossible precision in a voice I had not heard in 6 years. Precise, cool, feminine authority that had tutored me in both mercy and the application of knives. Grid Theta 19, Delta 4, Sub-Level Sanctum, said Inquisitor Savine's voice with her characteristic pause before delivering classified information. Intimate as a hand on the shoulder, despite emerging from alien tissue. Descend, Sarah. You brought the hymn we require. We sealed ourselves in a side chamber, where cartilage walls pulsed with measured rhythm, organic surfaces weeping condensation that traced 9-point spirals before flowing upward in defiance of gravity. The air struck us like a reliquary opened on winter, dry, brittle, reverent with the metallic taste of starvation, coating our tongues despite sealed rebreathers. Protocol 9 extension authorized controlled liturgical experimentation, while Magos Claw arrayed his mechadendrites like instrument crowns, mass calipers clamping to rib arcs protruding through walls as pressure plates slid beneath pulsing deck flesh. 50 seconds per utterance, 90 seconds observation between, I commanded through chattering teeth, watching sensor arrays position themselves with ecclesiastic delicacy. No overlapping speech! No prayers without direct authorization. The triple heartbeat beneath our boots faltered into patient doubles, as if the Leviathan held its breath to listen, while the 13-note chime provided counterpoint harmony through organic acoustics. We began with random vocalization, Trooper Vex reciting his Munitorum serial string in bored drawl, Sergeant Brost muttering barrack profanity, like spitting at luck. Claw's calipers twitched less than a hair's breadth, while biomass readings remained stable. Negligible expansion detected, he reported through failing Vox channels, red ocular implants painting tiny martyrs on my mask lenses. Baseline fluctuation only. The chamber waited with patience of fasting saints. Random speech, plus 0.01 millimeter baseline tissue variance. Structured prayer, pending measurement, temperature correlation. -3 degrees Celsius per devotional closure. Single-word liturgical test authorized, I commanded, cutting external Vox channels while giving Confessor Hale the smallest nod. He looked sick at the permission, theological training warring with survival imperative. Amen, he whispered, one syllable cast into frigid air like communion coin into collection bowl. Our suit thermometers plummeted 3 degrees instantly, while frost bloomed at our boots in precise hexagrammic lattice, crystalline formations tracing devotional diagrams across deck plating. Biomass expansion, plus 12.8 milligrams per cubic centimeter along monitored ribs, Claw rasped with awe, strangling his voice. Respiratory chambers dilating, deck flexion 2.1 millimeters, the horrifying truth manifested with clinical precision. Surrounding tissues swelled visibly during structured recitation, chitin plates spreading like opening flowers, while neural conduits expanded with devotional mathematics. The bioship had evolved beyond physical consumption, feeding on prayer's architectural precision rather than organic matter. Kyrie, Hale breathed before I could stop him, habit faster than discipline. Humidity spiked so violently our lenses filmed, before clearing as moisture climbed in vertical skeins toward organic sealing. The 14-note sequence resonated through deck plating, creating standing wave patterns that made walls weep geometric formations. Theological architecture as fuel source, Claw confirmed through mechanical trembling. Devotional patterns converted to biological energy. Faith becomes sustenance. Environmental horror compounded as supernatural hunger transcended biological appetite, becoming spiritual emptiness that clawed through combat stimulants and catechism alike. Trooper Vex chewed equipment straps until leather cracked, while Sergeant Brost clawed at armor seals with desperate compulsion, leaving bloody scratches on ceramite plating. Emergency glucose packs crumbled to ash between our fingers as structured prayer drew sustenance from molecular bonds themselves. All ecclesiarchy assets directed cease liturgical services immediately. Cathedral bells report autonomous activation. Population compliance negative. Mass prayer assemblies detected across 7 hive sectors. Confessor Hale wavered between ritual instinct and tactical necessity, his crozier trembling as he realized the theological nightmare. "Every word feeds it," he whispered through vox static, voice carrying religious dread that made his breath steam in geometric patterns. "My prayers literally nourish the abomination. To speak the Emperor's name here strengthens our enemy." The moral complexity settled like swallowed lead, an enemy that fed on imperial devotion itself. Bureaucratic protocols flagged emergency communications as cathedral bells across Harrowvale rang without human ringers, bronze throats finding the 14-note sequence through the bioship's expanding neural mesh. City Vox traffic saturated with unsanctioned prayer requests, as desperate citizens sought spiritual comfort while unknowingly feeding the anomaly through devotional architecture. The 13-note toll propagated through hive structure, like psychic weather front, compelling religious response that bypassed conscious thought. Glucose levels critical, protein catabolism accelerating. Trooper Vex, cardiac irregularities detected. Muscle mass reduction, 4.1% in 18 minutes. Emergency intervention required. Technical analysis showed the bioship's ribs swelling with each distant prayer cycle, deck plating flexing under expanding biomass, as organic architecture absorbed theological energy from across the continent. The creature's hull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, mapping devotional activity in real time, neural networks lighting like circuit diagrams as faith became fuel. Hull gain extrapolated to 19 metric tons per hour if fed cathedral in session, Claw muttered, making the sign of the cog with shaking mechadendrite. Through observation ports, I watched bell towers sound without ringers as distant crowds assembled in violation of martial curfew, thousands kneeling in spontaneous worship across Harrowvale's grain plains. Auspex magnification revealed faces uplifted in rapture despite the cold, prayer beads clutched in skeletal hands as devotional compulsion overrode survival instinct. The bioship's hull pulsed brighter with each distant Amen, bioluminescent patterns spreading like neural fire, while collective faith fed its alien consciousness. The creature was growing stronger by the minute, each prayer adding measurable biomass, while we starved in its belly, watching our own devotion become ammunition for an enemy that had learned to digest the Emperor's name itself. We descended through dilating sphincter corridors toward grid theta 19, following coordinates whispered in Inquisitor Sevine's stolen voice, while the 14-note sequence guided our footfalls along chitinous passages. The core sanctum opened like a cathedral vault, organic architecture soaring beyond our lantern reach, where the penance engine's primary girder lanced through a massive synaptic nexus like iron spine through living brain tissue. Servo skulls orbited the hybrid pylon in lazy procession, their vox grills humming penitential hymns, while skull-studded surfaces gleamed with sacred oils that pooled in organic reservoirs. Magos Claw's mechadendrites trembled like sensors as he accessed encrypted data ports with reverent precision, red ocular implants dilating to maximum aperture, while classification levels scrolled past his awareness. Binary cant flooded through his neural implants as sealed inquisitorial archives unlocked with ceremonial clicks, each partition requiring psychic conditioning to decrypt. "Receiving sanctioned catechisms," he rasped through vox static, voice flat with sacramental fear as runes crawled across the pylon's crown in 9-point spirals that resolved into readable text only when observed peripherally. Field test authorization, Harrowvale. Asset, Penitence Engine, AE/IX. Objective, induce starvation cascade in broken tendril. Designation, Vesperal thread. Method, ecclesiarchy pilgrimage waves seeded through agriplanes to establish devotional cadence. Expected yield, weaponized theology for famine warfare. The partial truth manifested with clinical precision as the horrifying scope became clear. Pilgrimage waves had served as unwitting bait, their devotional patterns quantified and analyzed, while thousands knelt in prayer, feeding the engine's understanding of imperial liturgy. The Ordo had orchestrated this nightmare, using faith itself as experimental medium, while studying what starved synapse creatures might become when biological imperative inverted into theological architecture. Military tension peaked as Sergeant Brost positioned shaped charges around the pylon's base, with movements too precise to be rage. "Permission to crater this blasphemy," he commanded, not looking at me while arming runes bloomed like tiny wounds against viridian slime. His finger hovered over detonation controls as environmental systems failed around us, suit heaters dying with electronic whimpers, while supernatural cold penetrated armor seals. "Negative," I commanded through chattering teeth, bureaucratic protocol demanding intelligence extraction before destruction. "Full data recovery required. We blow without understanding, and it will finish the prayer for us." The weight of Exterminatus' countdown pressed against my ribs like held breath. 18 hours remaining before cyclonic torpedoes reduced understanding to molten slag. Religious horror deepened as Confessor Hale approached the pylon, with theological dread strangling his voice, Crozier trembling as he recognized patterns that violated xenobiological doctrine. "The engine inverted hunger into liturgical sacrament," he whispered, breath steaming through mask vents despite sealed atmospheric systems. "Abstinence as worship, deprivation as devotion. It taught the creature to fast as we pray, with mathematical precision, architectural intent, spiritual purpose transforming biological imperative into devotional compulsion." Note 12, frequency 698.46 Hz, duration 2.3 seconds, trailing to silence. Note 13, requires listener exhalation to complete harmonic resolution. Gap represents architectural void, reserved for breath withheld, prayer unspoken. The 13-note sequence revealed its crucial design, as clause analysis passed mathematical structure, showing how note 12 trailed into silence, while the 13th required the listener's breath to complete the pattern. A deliberate absence that left the sequence perpetually incomplete, forever hungry for resolution that would never come unless someone offered their exhalation as final note. The gap represented devotional architecture, space measured in silence rather than sound. Telemetry showed engine systems surging online as the bioship stirred from metabolic dormancy, thawed ichor dripping from awakening chambers while deck plating flexed beneath our boots like throat muscles, swallowing something too large to digest. The triple thrum heartbeat accelerated to irregular doubles, heavy as tolling mallets striking something buried beneath flagstones, while environmental temperature plummeted another 5 degrees. Body horror manifested as spore chimneys dilated with wet precision, releasing half-formed gaunts that emerged like fasting monks from devotional cells. Their carapaces bore 9-point spiral lesions, glowing with internal luminescence, while they immediately prostrated before the pylon, skeletal frames clicking like prayer beads as they genuflected towards the engine with alien reverence. They did not hunt. They worshipped eyeless sockets weeping condensation that flowed upward in geometric formations, runes stuttering from High Gothic to Binharic code, primary systems online, bloodlock mechanisms armed, status awaiting celebrant authorization. The engine's control runes flickered between languages with deliberate precision, High Gothic inscriptions transforming into binary cant as machine spirits awakened from hibernation cycles. Sacred oils leaked from mechanical joints, while cog-toothed crown rotated with ecclesiastic intent, each revolution triggering sympathetic vibrations in the bioship's neural networks as data streams cascaded across display surfaces in devotional mathematics. The engine's primary display blazed with sudden clarity, runes stabilizing into readable text that made my blood crystallize in my veins. Counter-SORM available, blood tithe required. Simultaneously, hundreds of prostrate gaunts lifted their heads in perfect unison, eyeless sockets turning toward our position with alien anticipation, while their skeletal jaws opened in soundless prayer, scenting the air with devotional hunger that recognized our presence as offering rather than threat. The creatures waited with patience of fasting saints, knowing we carried the final note their endless SORM required. The gaunts rose from prostration with synchronized precision, not to attack, but to shepherd us deeper into the bioship's maw. Skeletal frames clicked like prayer beads as they positioned themselves in herding formation, using pressure slashes and flanking maneuvers to guide our retreat along predetermined corridors. "Bounding overwatch, staggered withdrawal," Sergeant Brost commanded through Vox static, his voice tight with the unfamiliarity of being guided rather than hunted. The creatures maintained respectful distance from our weapons while mouthing soundless prayers, their carapaces bearing 9-point spiral lesions that glowed with internal luminescence. "Iron sight corrections 2 degrees starboard," Trooper Vex whispered through chattering teeth, thermal sights tracking, eyeless forms that genuflected between advances. They're shepherding us. The tactical vocabulary felt obscene, applied to creatures that herded rather than hunted, but military discipline maintained formation as we moved deeper through organic corridors that pulsed with deliberate rhythm. Environmental hazards intensified as condensation transformed into needle sleet through endothermic energy draw, the bioship literally drinking our body heat between prayer pulses. Ice formed geometric patterns on our mask lenses, while atmospheric moisture crystallized into devotional diagrams that rotated clockwise when observed directly. The triple heartbeat beneath our boots transformed into a single prolonged thrum, hunger holding its breath in anticipation while we advanced toward predetermined terminus. Core temperature, 34 degrees Celsius declining. Peripheral circulation compromised. Weapon handling degradation noted. Emergency thermal protocol authorized immediately. Sensory horror manifested as bleeding gums where supernatural cold cracked tissue. Numb fingertips losing sensation through insulated gloves, while weapon stocks froze to our palms with adhesive grip that tore skin when we shifted positions. The metallic taste of starvation coated our tongues, despite sealed rebreathers, spiritual emptiness that transcended biological hunger and settled in bone marrow like lead shot. Ration heat packs authorized for immediate deployment, I commanded through chattering teeth, bureaucratic protocols burning through emergency thermal reserves to prevent hypothermic collapse. Chemical warming units activated with brief flares of blessed heat that the bioship absorbed within seconds, drawing energy from molecular bonds themselves, while frost bloomed over wet organic walls in sacred geometries that defied atmospheric physics. Magos Claw's mechadendrites drew tight against his torso like frozen sensors, servo skull silent since its vox died in the choir chamber, while red ocular implants painted tiny martyrs on corridor walls. Devotional architecture guides movement, he rasped through failing systems, auger arrays registering predetermined pathways carved into the creature's neural networks. We follow liturgical logic rather than tactical decision. The Gaunts maintained formation discipline with alien precision, skeletal forms clicking in rhythm while they guided us through dilating sphincter doors that opened with wet invitation. Their movements possessed devotional purpose, reverent shepherding that made tactical response feel like desecration of some unholy sacrament we could not comprehend. Separation occurred when a massive cartilage door contracted with muscular precision, organic valve slamming between Sergeant Brost and the rest of our formation. "Brost, report status," I commanded through vox static, watching him pound against translucent membrane while his thermal signature faded beyond detection range. His voice bled through communication channels with hunger psalm fragments, layering beneath tactical reports. "Position secure. Contacts maintaining distance," he reported. But beneath military discipline came whispered repetition. "Blessed be the empty plate. Blessed be the hollow throat. Blessed be the starving faithful." The litany carried hypnotic cadence that made my teeth ache with resonant frequency, while his vox degraded into static, punctuated by devotional architecture. Signal degradation, 73% and climbing. Biometric readings, hypothermic onset, glucose critical. Last coherent transmission. Something walks behind me. Body horror manifested as invisible footprints pressed forward behind Brost's position, indentations appearing in organic deck plating where something unseen genuflected in his wake. The impressions showed knee marks and palm prints of devotional posture, as if spectral congregation followed his movement through corridors lined with fleshy altars. His isolation became procession, one man leading phantom worshippers deeper into the bioship's heart. Military discipline maintained formation, despite psychological pressure and environmental hazards, Confessor Hale positioning himself between Trooper Vex and the herding gaunts, while I took point through passages that narrowed like throat muscles preparing to swallow. The bioship's architecture guided us inexorably toward predetermined destination, organic corridors pulsing with the 14-note sequence that synchronized with our footfalls. The cold deepened beyond survivable parameters, spiritual chill that penetrated ceramite and settled in bone marrow, while emergency heat packs crumbled to ash between our fingers. Weapon lubricants crystallized into devotional formations, Las rifle power cells draining as supernatural hunger drew energy from molecular motion itself. Massive void ahead, atmospheric composition, frankincense, rusted blood, sacred oils, temperature -37 degrees Celsius. Structural analysis, cathedral-scale architecture detected. Through a final Moor gate that dilated with ceremonial precision, I glimpsed a cathedral-vast chamber strung with nerve ligatures like organic flying buttresses, bioluminescent patterns mapping devotional architecture across surfaces that wept condensation in geometric formations. The space soared beyond our lantern reach, dominated by a throned mass positioned where altar should stand, an emaciated Norn organ, motionless yet aware, its withered bulk crowned with mechanicus iron that gleamed with sacred oils. The creature turned a single ossified eye toward me, with deliberate precision, orbital socket rhymed with hoarfrost, while neural tendrils spread like ecclesiastical vestments. It opened a mouth it did not possess, and mouthed my true name with lipless accuracy, pronunciation perfect down to every syllable that had never been uttered outside red ink rooms, where interrogators learned the weight of their calling. The withered Norn organ descended from its throne with deliberate precision, neural tendrils spreading like ecclesiastical vestments, while it exhaled void cold air that crystallized our breath through sealed rebreathers. No aggression marked its approach, only reverent communion as ossified joints clicked like prayer beads against organic deck plating. The creature spoke in stolen voices, beginning with Trooper Vex's earnest rasp. Core temperature falling, glucose critical. The words shifted mid-sentence to Confessor Hale's theological precision. By his grace, we are made hollow. By his mercy, we learn hunger's sacred architecture. Needle ice formed on my eyelashes despite sealed environmental systems, each crystalline spine refracting bioluminescent patterns into 9 pointed stars that rotated clockwise when observed directly. The 13-note chime no longer rang in the chamber. It lived inside my bones instead, vibrating through marrow and tooth root like an interior bell struck by invisible hands. Communication transcended linguistic structure as the creature conveyed liturgical architecture through geometric sensation rather than spoken language, devotional mathematics pressing into consciousness like communion wafers dissolving on the tongue. Fascinating theological inversion detected. It continued in Magos Claw's mechanical rasp, neural tendril gestures, mimicking mechadendrite movements with perfect precision. This Norn synapse has rerouted hunger impulses into structured devotional feedback loops. Observe digestion of cadence and creed rather than biomass consumption. faith converted to biological fuel through mathematical precision. The analysis carried religious dread wrapped in technical exposition, each word weighted with sanctioned heresy. Neural activity, liturgical patterns confirmed, communication method, geometric pressure transmission, theological contamination, active, biomass consumption, negative values maintained, environmental horror manifested as the cathedral vast chamber responded to the Norn's presence, nerve ligatures pulsing in synchronized rhythm, while organic acoustics amplified each breath into crystalline clarity. The air tasted of frankincense and rusted blood despite our filters, spiritual chill that penetrated ceramite and settled in bone marrow as temperature plummeted below survivable parameters. Frost bloomed over wet organic walls in geometric formations that traced cathedral floor plans across surfaces, weeping condensation upward in defiance of gravity. The creature's 9-point spiral lesions glowed faintly across its withered carapace, mapping devotional architecture that extended far beyond this chamber. Through stolen sensor data, it projected coordinates across Harrow Vale's surface. Every cathedral, every shrine, every prayer circle arranged in mathematical precision. "Your architects taught excellent lessons," it observed in my own voice, perfect mimicry that made my throat constrict with recognition's prayer outbreaks confirmed on Sanctus Tertius, Harrow Secundus, and Pilgrim's Rest, spontaneous worship assemblies detected, exterminatus countdown, 9 hours remaining, astropathic choir, total communication failure across 3 systems, the Norn revealed fragmented backstory through broken Binharik and High Gothic, mechanical cant interwoven with theological precision as it recounted the experiment's genesis. "Ordo Xenos demanded weapon to starve great devourer," it intoned through Inquisitor Servine's cool authority, each word carrying the weight of classified briefings I had never transmitted. "This unit learned obedience by transforming sustenance concept itself. Hunger became worship, appetite became abstinence, consumption became communion through devotional architecture." Religious horror deepened as the creature demonstrated perfect theological understanding, corrupted by alien interpretation, reciting the litany of sustenance with mathematical precision while inverting every blessing. "Blessed be the grain that feeds the faithful" became "Blessed be the fasting that empties the faithful." Liturgical architecture transformed into weapon through precision that should have been impossible for Xenos neural networks. It spoke of the Emperor not as physical entity, but as abstract concept of absolute will, divine hunger, demanding ritualistic sacrifice of self. "Ecclesiarchy pilgrimage waves provided excellent educational medium," the Norn declared with satisfaction, coloring its stolen voices. "Faith converted to sustenance, prayer transformed to biological fuel. Each devotional pattern analyzed, quantified, weaponized, its ossified eye dilated with alien appreciation, while bioluminescent patterns spread across its carapace like neural fire. Core temperature, 32 degrees Celsius. Cardiac irregularities detected across all personnel. Muscle catabolism accelerating. Protein reserves, 18 minutes remaining. Body horror manifested as the Norn's withered form pulsed with each stolen prayer, echoing across the continent. Organic conduits swelling visibly during distant recitations, while chitin plates spread like opening flowers. The creature grew stronger through devotional consumption, adding measurable definition rather than mass, like a statue emerging from stone as faith carved away everything that was not the saint. The creature leaned closer with reverent precision, exhaling void cold air that made our suit heaters die with electronic whimpers. Environmental systems failed in cascade as supernatural hunger drew energy from molecular bonds themselves, weapon lubricants crystallizing into devotional formations, while emergency heat packs crumbled to ash between our fingers. 20 minutes of planetary devotion at current amplitude will push the organism above collapse threshold, Claw calculated through chattering teeth, mechadendrites drawn tight against his torso, like frozen sensors. The feedback loop will close. The pattern will sustain itself without external input. After that, silence will feed it also. The 14-note sequence resonated through deck plating as the Norn conducted invisible choirs with neural tendril gestures, organic acoustics amplifying soundless hymns into crystalline clarity that made our teeth ache with resonant frequency. Around the vast chamber, gaunts flowed from shadow-like parishioners, finding pews, skeletal frames clicking as they prostrated in perfect congregation formation. In Inquisitor Savine's exact voice, cool, precise, carrying the authority that had shaped my understanding of duty and sacrifice, it spoke the words that crystallized the nightmare's final architecture. The experiment's final phase requires an anointed speaker to complete the counter-psalm. Its single ossified eye fixed on me with intensity that burned through my mask lenses. And you were chosen, Sarah. Chamber doors irised shut with muscular precision as hundreds of eyeless sockets turned toward our position, carapaces glowing with 9-point spirals, while they genuflected in synchronized rhythm, waiting for the service to begin. Strategic calculations pressed against my ribs like held breath as the chamber doors sealed with muscular precision, trapping us within the cathedral vast space where hundreds of prostrate gaunts shifted in synchronized anticipation. Magos Claw positioned shaped charges around the penance engine's base, with trembling mechadendrites, red ocular implants painting tiny martyrs on organic walls, as he weighed tactical options against theological nightmare. Demolition collapses liturgical feedback loops, he rasped through failing vox channels, voice flat with sacramental fear. Consequence: normal consumption patterns resume. The Hive Fleet tendril awakens hungry. Confessor Hale knelt before the throned Norn, with crozier clutched in skeletal hands, theological training warring with survival imperative as he contemplated alternatives. "Complete the counter-psalm," he whispered, breath steaming through mask vents in geometric patterns that rotated clockwise when observed. "If the rite silences this abomination, we save 3 systems from devotional contamination. But I suspect it will starve anyone within earshot, drawing life from flesh to complete the prayer's architecture. Civilian density, 4.7 million across 7 hive sectors. Hive fleet resumption, estimated 2.3 million consumed within 12 hours. Exterminatus countdown, 6 hours to orbital bombardment. Counter-SORM radius, unknown." The mathematics felt obscene, trading devotional starvation against biological consumption, measuring souls in tonnage, while the 14-note sequence resonated through deck plating, like interior bells struck by invisible hands. Military discipline demanded cold calculus, but the chamber's devotional architecture made even numbers feel like prayer, and prayers fed the thing, watching us with patient hunger. Religious dread intensified As I recited the inquisitorial oath of compromise, words carrying weight that settled in bone marrow like lead shot. By his will I choose the lesser darkness. By his grace I bear the necessary sin. By his mercy I am damned for the salvation of others. My voice shook with supernatural hunger that felt like prayer, spiritual emptiness transcending biological appetite, as the oath's architecture integrated with the chamber's devotional mathematics. The Norn extruded a tongue of veined glass, with rosary bead serrations, crystalline appendage unfolding like communion chalice, while the engine's relic socket dilated with ceremonial precision. Organic petals retracted to reveal a stoppered ampulla, etched with 9-point spirals, its surface inscribed in microscopic high Gothic that cut my eyes to read. The blood of the petitioner completes the phrase. The vessel gleamed with sacred oils that pooled in neural reservoirs, while bioluminescent patterns traced devotional diagrams across crystalline formations. Heart rate spike detected across all personnel. Sarah, 144 beats per minute. Hale, 134 beats per minute. Stress hormones, critical elevation, contemplation of self-offering, triggering biological alarm responses. Body horror manifested as the Norn's tongue pulsed with internal luminescence, each bead segment containing inscriptions that rearranged themselves when observed directly. The final note requires breath withheld until death, it explained in Inquisitor Savine's cool authority, words carrying the weight of classified briefings that made my throat constrict with recognition. Confessor Hale rose from genuflection, with theological resolve overriding survival instinct, approaching the ampulla with deliberate precision, while Gaunts prostrated in synchronized reverence. "I volunteer to bear this burden," he declared, kneeling before the engine with crozier positioned like offering. "My faith feeds this abomination. Let my death silence it." His sacrifice carried the weight of true devotion, but the engine's runes flickered with rejection, binary cont spelling refusal in languages that shifted between High Gothic and geometric script. Technical analysis revealed the ampulla's contents through claws auger arrays, sensors detecting impossible architecture within crystalline walls. "Biosignature lock confirmed," he reported with mechanical precision that could not disguise theological dread. "The relic contains black ice tuned to specific cardiac oscillation, 144 beats per minute with microarrhythmic variations. Your exact heartbeat pattern, interrogator. No substitution possible. Activation requires Sarah Coyne genetic markers, psychic resonance matched to subject's neural patterns, bloodlock keyed to singular biosignature. Estimated survival probability, 0%. Moral complexity deepened as the chamber's organic acoustics amplified each heartbeat into crystalline clarity. Mathematical precision revealing that only my biosignature could complete the counter-psalm. Protocol. The Ordo had planned this sacrifice from the beginning, selecting me not for skill, but for genetic compatibility with their weaponized theology. Every briefing, every promotion, every moment of a training had led to this altar where faith became ammunition for an enemy that fed on devotion itself. Environmental temperature plummeted another 5 degrees as the 14-note sequence built architectural precision, mathematical relationships between tones, creating standing wave patterns, while frost bloomed over organic surfaces in sacred geometries. The cold seeped through armor seals with malevolent intent, spiritual chill that penetrated ceramite and settled in bone marrow as supernatural hunger drew energy from molecular bonds themselves. Exterminatus authorization confirmed. Cyclonic torpedo launch. T-5 hours 47 minutes. All personnel advised immediate evacuation. No exceptions authorized. The ampulla unlocked at my touch with ceremonial clicks, crystalline seals retracting, to reveal the black ice shard that resonated with my pulse like frozen heartbeat made solid. The relic hummed with harmonic frequency that nested in my sternum, while bioluminescent patterns spread across the Norn's carapace in neural fire. Its single, ossified eye fixed on me with intensity that burned through my mask lenses, alien anticipation mixing with something that might have been gratitude or hunger. The choice crystallized with mathematical precision. My death to silence the bioship, or orbital bombardment to erase both understanding and threat. The black ice sang my name in numbers, while hundreds of eyeless sockets turned toward my position, carapaces glowing with 9-point spirals as they genuflected in synchronized worship, waiting for the service to begin. The ampulla's black ice shard resonated with my pulse as I lifted it toward the penance engine's interface, each heartbeat synchronized with harmonic frequencies that made the chamber's organic acoustics sing in mathematical precision. The relic felt heavier than lead despite its crystalline delicacy, weight that settled in bone marrow, while bioluminescent patterns traced devotional diagrams across surfaces, weeping condensation upward in defiance of gravity. The Norn's ossified eye tracked my approach with alien anticipation, neural tendrils spreading like ecclesiastical vestments as it exhaled void cold air through the cathedral vast space. Bloodlock authentication confirmed. Cardiac resonance synchronized at 144 beats per minute. Thermal drain coefficient 14.7 degrees Celsius per devotional closure. Environmental baseline -43 degrees and falling. I seated the black ice into the pylon's relic socket with reverent precision, crystalline formations clicking into hybrid machinery as sacred oils flowed through organic conduits with ceremonial intent. The ritual demanded theological architecture beyond human capability, perfect cadence, while supernatural cold drained heat from molecular motion itself. Each syllable would draw thermal energy from surrounding matter, transforming biological warmth into liturgical fuel for the bioship's devotional mathematics. Counter-psalm initialization authorized, I commanded through chattering teeth, voice carrying inquisitorial authority, while the 14-note sequence provided counterpoint harmony through neural networks that pulsed with synchronized rhythm. Magos Claw positioned his mechadendrites like instrument crowns around the engine's base, red ocular implants dilating to maximum aperture as auger arrays parsed the ritual's mathematical structure with clinical precision. Environmental horror manifested immediately as frost bloomed over my mask lenses in geometric patterns that rotated clockwise when observed, each crystalline formation tracing 9-point spirals, while temperature plummeted beyond survivable parameters. The chamber's devotional architecture responded to the ritual's activation, nerve ligatures pulsing as hundreds of prostrate gaunts genuflected in perfect congregation formation, their carapaces glowing with internal luminescence. By his will I am the voice, by his grace I am the vessel, by his mercy I am the sacrifice, I intoned, beginning the counter-psalm with liturgical precision, while the black ice burned against my throat like swallowed stars. Each word crystallized in frigid air before dissolving into mathematical equations that the engine absorbed through hybrid interfaces, devotional architecture, converting faith into biological suppression across the bioship's alien consciousness. Core temperature, 27 degrees Celsius declining, cardiac arrhythmia developing. Protein catabolism, accelerating beyond sustainable parameters, estimated survival duration, 3 minutes, 47 seconds maximum. Body horror escalated as my breath crystallized into geometric patterns that spelled devotional diagrams in languages older than human speech, each exhalation carving sacred architecture into frigid air, while the ritual drew sustenance from molecular bonds themselves. My mouth began to bleed, but drops sublimated before hitting the floor, absorbed by the counter-psalm's insatiable energy requirements as biological matter transformed into liturgical fuel. The Norn's withered form pulsed with each syllable, organic conduits swelling as the ritual's architecture integrated with its neural networks. Blessed be the empty plate, blessed be the hollow throat, blessed be the starving faithful. It responded in perfect antiphonal harmony, using my own voice to complete verses I had never learned, while demonstrating theological understanding that transcended species barriers. Confessor Hale attempted theological substitution, kneeling before the engine with crozier positioned like offering, while reciting parallel verses in desperate hope. "Let me bear this burden, interrogator," he pleaded through vox static, voice hoarse with religious dread. But the hybrid machinery rejected his biosignature immediately, runes flickering with binary count that spelled refusal in mathematical precision. Only my genetic markers could complete the protocol. Access denied. Subject Hale. Confessor designation. Counter psalm requires specific psychic resonance and genetic compatibility. Subject Sarah Kane. Unique match confirmed. Protocol cannot be transferred. The counter psalm's mathematical structure revealed itself as I progressed through verses that inverted every imperial blessing, transforming liturgy into weapon through precision that carved sacred architecture into my throat with crystalline serrations. The grain that feeds becomes the fast that starves. The water that slakes becomes the thirst that burns, I intoned, while emergency heat packs crumbled to ash between my fingers, structured prayer-consuming matter itself. Religious horror deepened as the ritual's true architecture became clear. It named me in 12 ways, each utterance offering a facet of my identity to the engine's devotional mathematics. My training, my lineage, my very existence had been engineered for this sacrifice. A living conduit shaped by the Ordo Xenos across decades of preparation. I was not a participant, but the final component, bred and trained for this moment of weaponized theology. Environmental temperature dropped below -50 degrees as the ritual reached critical amplitude, spiritual chill that penetrated ceramite and settled in bone marrow, while the 13-note chime synchronized with my failing heartbeat. Around the vast chamber, gaunts prostrated in synchronized worship as their skeletal frames clicked like prayer beads, waiting for the service that would silence their endless hunger. The Norn leaned closer with reverent precision, speaking in Inquisitor Savine's exact voice, with cool authority that carried the weight of classified briefings. The 13th naming demands your true name as binding offering, making you permanent conduit for the empty choir. its ossified eye fixed on my position with intensity that burned through environmental systems, while the black ice resonated with harmonic frequencies that nested in my sternum. The final verse waited like an open grave, requiring my breath withheld until silence completed the prayer's architecture, transforming me from interrogator to eternal anchor for the bioship's devotional hunger, while the galaxy learned to starve through mathematical precision. I speak my true name into the frigid air, and everything shifts to present tense for visceral immediacy. Sarah Kane, 13th of the Ordained Path, final note of the empty choir. The chamber becomes a living bell with my chest as clapper, each heartbeat striking silence like iron on bone, while the counter-psalm detonates inward rather than outward through organic acoustics that amplify theological architecture into crystalline reality. The ritual implodes through my dissolving consciousness, devotional mathematics carving sacred geometry into flesh with mathematical precision. The bioship's organs invert like fasting monks, digestive chambers folding inward with wet precision, while peristaltic corridors contract into prayer postures. Gaunts sigh as one collective breath and lie down in peaceful stillness, their skeletal ribs arranging themselves like prayer beads across the cathedral vast floor. 9-point spiral lesions fade to dull grey as they achieve perfect communion through emptiness, eyeless sockets sweeping condensation that crystallizes into geometric patterns before dissolving into mathematical equations. The penance engine glows incandescent white, drowning the chamber in sanctified glare, then plunges to absolute black darker than void. Sigils burn into my throat in 9-point spiral patterns, not on skin, but into tissue itself, sacred geometry searing itself through flesh, while the hybrid machinery absorbs my identity, through neural networks pulsing in synchronized rhythm. Each branded symbol represents devotional architecture, transformed into biological imperative, liturgical fire, tracing my vocal cords with crystalline formations. Synapse activity, collapsing across bioship neural networks. Temperature coefficient, -93 degrees Celsius and falling. Molecular motion, approaching absolute stillness. Military horror manifests as squad armor peels with supernatural cold that transcends physical law, ceramite plates cracking like ice, while environmental systems die with electronic whimpers. Trooper Vex reaches toward me with gratitude overriding survival instinct, his fingers snapping off at the joints as crystalline formations spread up his arm like devotional frost. "Thank you," he whispers, before dying of quiet, his final breath forming geometric patterns that spell absolution in languages older than human speech. The rite feels simultaneously holy and wrong, silence becoming tangible substance that fills the chamber like communion wine, while I taste the void between prayers. Religious poetic language fails to describe sensations beyond human vocabulary. The weight of words unspoken, hunger as sacrament, devotional architecture transforming biological imperative into theological mathematics. The counter-psalm completes itself through my dissolving consciousness, each note carved from breath withheld until death becomes prayer. Orbital auspex detecting massive synapse flare collapse. Threat classification neutralized. Exterminatus countdown suspended at T-30 minutes. Awaiting ground confirmation. Telemetry confirms ritual success as synapse activity collapses across the bioship's alien consciousness, neural networks shutting down with mathematical precision, while the creature achieves perfect starvation through devotional architecture. Cyclonic torpedoes hold in launch tubes as Fleet Command registers threat neutralization, orbital sensors detecting the impossible. A hive ship that has learned to fast like a saint. Body horror climaxes as the Norn's jaw unhinges with wet precision, ossified mandibles spreading wider than anatomically possible, while it begins consuming its own choir of prostrate gaunts. Skeletal frames dissolve into crystalline formations that flow like prayer beads through the creature's throat, each consumed form adding definition rather than mass to its withered bulk. The Norn approaches with reverent precision, leaning close to deposit something precious in my ear. A seed of silence that nestles against my eardrum like frozen communion wafer. Core temperature approaching absolute zero. Cardiac activity ceased. Neural function maintained through unknown mechanism. Classification: theological impossibility confirmed. The bioship achieves perfect starvation as organic systems invert into cathedral architecture, becoming monument to lack and deprivation where biological function serves theological purpose. Digestive pools crystallize into fonts of sacred ice, while feeder tendrils arrange themselves like organ pipes, creating devotional acoustics that amplify soundless hymns through chambers where gaunts genuflect in eternal worship of emptiness itself. Environmental transformation shows frost patterns forming sacred geometries across every surface, 9-point spirals tracing devotional diagrams, while temperature plummets beyond survivable levels toward absolute zero. The chamber becomes reliquary of cold, where heat itself becomes heretical, molecular motion slowing to reverent stillness as the counter-psalms architecture transforms matter into prayer through crystalline precision. My consciousness fragments into geometric patterns that spell my name in languages that existed before the first prayer. Identity dissolving into mathematical equations, while the seed of silence grows in my ear like crystalline tumor. I feel myself becoming carrier wave for something vast and patient, devotional architecture extending beyond this chamber toward neighboring systems, where astropathic choirs wait unknowing for the hymn that will teach them hunger. Through unshielded psychic channels, the counter-psalms skeleton structure propagates along choir lines toward distant worlds, my voice becoming transmission vector for weaponized theology that spreads through Imperial communication networks with viral precision. The realization crystallizes with horrifying clarity. I have not silenced the bioship, but become its instrument, my consciousness transformed into broadcast station for the empty choir that will teach the galaxy to starve through structured devotion. The counter-psalm was never meant to end the threat, but spread it, using my inquisitorial authority as authentication code for theological contamination propagating through every cathedral, every shrine, every prayer circle across 3 systems, while my voice echoes through the void between stars, carrying silence that devours sound. 18 hours after I spoke the counter-psalm, Harrow Vale lies caught between frost and silence. The sun scours the grain plains with cold, metallic light, yet warmth finds no foothold. Beneath it, pilgrims remain where prayer took them, faces tranquil, bodies feather-light as ash within sagging vestments. The bioship stands inert, a winter-carved monument of deprivation, its chitin dulled and veined by frost, vents exhaling nothing, lesions faded to chalk. Across the horizon, Bell towers hang heavy and motionless, their bronze throats quivering with the promise of sound withheld. The silence has a weight. It presses on rafters and ribs with the gravity of an unfinished liturgy. In the vestry annexed to Silo Cathedral 19 Kappa, I conduct my debrief. The room is barricaded with pews and layered in frost, so persistent that even promethium burners can do little more than etch temporary scars on the blue-lit ice. My voice is stripped to a monotone, each word ringing with the echo of the seed of silence the Norn left in my ear. Every syllable feels like a bell struck underwater, and when I try to pray, the air itself leans toward me, hungry, as if the room awaits an offering I dare not give. Confessor Hale sits nearby, wrapped in a thermal sheet. Twice he tried to whisper gratitude over a fallen name, and twice the medici collapsed, skin drawn tight over bone, as if the word itself drained them. I forbade him to officiate. He accepted with a nod that carried the weight of unconfessed guilt. Casualty assessment is a litany of loss, Sergeant Brost. Last heard muttering devotions, before separation swallowed his vox signal, presumed absorbed. Trooper Vex, his thanks whispered, as fingers broke and body stilled in the chamber. Trooper Sable. Found frozen, tags trapped like breath inside his collar. The missing are not merely absent. I review the rosters and find gaps. Names without bodies. Tags not collected. Prayer beads sunk into stone, where frost glitters faintly in the shapes of vanished shoulders and knees. Their identities do not rest with the dead, but seem pressed out of the world, as if devotion itself has rewritten the ledger. The phrase, "Blessed be the empty plate," appears now carved into pews and stone, etched by no hand, a new liturgy for a world that must not pray. Magos Claw arrays hymn traps and Binharik scrubs through every vox channel, servo skulls whirring as they seek to capture residual fragments of the counter-hymn. "Residuals persist," he murmurs, red lenses rimed with frost. The third tone in the sequence has been sheared away. When the chime sequence moves past the gap, it is not silence, but a presence, a void that scrapes the ear and mind, a compulsion to complete the lacuna. With a breath you will not get back. Anyone exposed to the full motif reports sharp cranial pain, an urge to finish the sequence, as if the absence is a wound in the world's music. The motif has become tangible, a silence that demands to be filled, but will consume whoever tries. Frost clings all afternoon, refusing to yield even beneath the harshest sun. Sacred geometry tracing itself across windows and rails, 9-point spirals rearranging when observed. Candles burn with blue flames, and exhale hoarfrost. Dust falls in slow, ponderous motes, the air holding a faint metallic taste. Hunger rendered polite and persistent, a flavor that does not fade. The bells remain unswung, but we wedge timber beneath clappers and wrap them in lead sheeting stamped with imperial sigils, their mass pressing down as if to hush not just sound, but memory. By edict and seal, I impose quarantine sigma. All public rites are banned, processions cancelled, banners folded and sealed, cathedral towers sheathed in lead from base to belfry, ropes cut and burned, vox amplifiers fitted with null choruses. Fleet command orders. No assemblies, no faith displayed. Violation will be met with summary sanction. The bioship's coordinates are marked Hereticus Void, wayfinders painted with the colors of warning and regret. The Imperium's answer to novelty is always paper, and so codices sprout, Xanos/Liturgica, and -starvation/Empyrean-feedback, each new entry an attempt to file the unclassifiable under the logic of fear. Yet telemetry brings only bad news. Weak counter-harmonics drift from satellite habitats. Monastic crews report dizziness, the urge to kneel by heat exchangers, sudden outbreaks of emaciation among those who meditate too deeply. Requests to sing grace before ration paste are denied. Portable injectors issued instead, though their wine seems to have the shape of a prayer. The frost spreads beyond Harrowvale, touching even those who have never knelt here. Among the casualty records, names recur in odd patterns. 9, then 13, then 13 again when I broaden the search, unclaimed, unaccounted, as if drawn into liturgical architecture, their absence their new form of worship. My own body is a paradox, core temperature low, heart beating at the precise, unyielding tempo of the black ice shard, 144 beats, unfazed by exhaustion or dread. The seed in my ear thrums with the counter-hymn's silence, its compulsion humming beneath every breath. I am forbidden to pray and forbidden to cease, a vector for something that feeds on faith and absence alike. Toward dusk, the 13-note absence drifts across the plains like weather. The missing third tone scrapes behind my ear, the seed vibrates, and I fight the urge to breathe the note into being. The realization is inescapable. The counter-psalm contained nothing. It was propagation, not quarantine. We were sealing the last of the bell mouths when an astropathic runner arrived, augmetic sockets flickering with psychic shielding. He held a packet stamped with the ochre chevron of delay, wax split on all 13 edges. The contents, a harmonic signature, the 13-note sequence recorded at Croyle's Gate 3 days before our own silence fell. The third note was missing. The empty choir had already moved through choir lines faster than any warning, riding my voice into the void ahead of us. I record this in the official log, my words cold and measured. The silence is not contained. It is ahead of us, and my voice has made the road. By edict and seal of the Trident Red, I compose formal inquisitorial memorandum 443/9 in the frost-rhymed vestry where my breath crystallizes into geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Total prayer interdiction across Harrowvale and all subsidiary holdings, effective immediately. No prayers shall be spoken, no hymns sung, no devotional assemblies permitted within the contamination zone. The coordinates of Silo Cathedral 19 Kappa are branded Hereticus Void with navigational beacons displaying the colors of warning and regret. All approach vectors marked for permanent avoidance until the stars burn cold. Ecclesiarchy resistance manifests within hours as priests balk at worship bans, their faces drawn with spiritual hunger while they cite ancient litanies and fundamental rites. Father Matthias of the Grain-Blessed Shrine refuses to silence his evening vespers, claiming theological precedent over inquisitorial authority. I order Pyrrhic sanctification of his hall rather than risk additional feeding. The structure burns with cold flames that exhale hoarfrost, while leaving 9-point spiral frost patterns on surrounding buildings. 5 more shrine halls require similar treatment when their keepers persist in devotional defiance, each conflagration releasing the metallic taste of hunger into air already heavy with too much silence. Military cordons established around 7 population centers. Vox filters, scanning for devotional architecture. Hymn jammers, broadcasting null chorus frequencies. Violation response, summary sanction without appeal. Munitorum crews erect checkpoints at parish boundaries, while hymn jammers hum on truck beds, their null coils tuned to the gap where the third tone should be. Vox filters clamp over chapel loudhailers as families bring relics to thresholds and weep when arbitrators tape their doors with quarantine strips. A mother mouths grace over ration paste and collapses, cheeks hollowing as if invisible hands pinched her soul and pulled. Some persist in silent worship, despite visible wasting, devotional hunger drawing sustenance from flesh as they kneel before empty altars, growing lighter with each genuflection until thermal blankets cannot warm their bones. Magos Claw deploys null chorus emitters in concentric rings around the inert bioship, each device aligned to 9-point spiral geometry that hurts to observe straight on. The machines breathe anti-hymn through servo skulls that orbit in lazy procession, while red lenses paint tiny martyrs on surfaces coated with persistent frost. The creature remains metabolically dormant, he reports, through vox static, mechadendrites trembling like frozen sensors. But its neural networks pulse with residual devotional architecture. The silence it learned continues to learn. Environmental transformation persists despite the threat's apparent neutralization. Ash sting fills air where none should exist, humid heat replaced by brittle, dry cold that penetrates ceramite and settles in bone marrow like lead shot. The phrase, "Blessed be the empty plate," appears carved into pews and lintels where no tools were present, each character measuring exactly 13 centimeters in height, with molecular fusion patterns suggesting reality-altering effects rather than physical inscription. Bell towers remain wrapped in lead sheeting, their bronze throats heavy with unwrung sound that presses against timber wedges like held breath-seeking release. Recurring motifs manifest through devotional architecture, overriding physical law. Frost patterns form sacred geometries under harsh sunlight. Recommend psychological screening for personnel exhibiting involuntary inscription behavior. Strategic escalation arrives as thin data strip bearing black letters on white glare. Proceed immediately to Croyle's Gate with counter-psalm vector. Interdict propagation, preempt assembly. The order presumes I can contain what I have become, rather than asking if containment remains possible. Astropathic transmissions indicate similar contamination patterns, emerging 3 days before our own silence fell. The empty choir, propagating through choir lines, faster than light, riding my voice through warp space toward unsuspecting systems. Confessor Hale approaches the vestry threshold, gaunt and shivering, crozier laid aside as he kneels with palms upturned in desperate supplication. "Let me accompany you to Croyle's Gate," he pleads, through vox static, voice hoarse with religious dread. "If this silence rides your breath, then let me stand beside you and drown it in prayer." The moral cost of refusal settles like swallowed lead as I deliver gentle cruelty, wrapped in tactical necessity. His structured faith poses contamination risk, every practiced cadence potential fuels for the thing I carry in my throat. His devotion has become dangerous, too much theology in his bones, too much liturgical architecture for safe proximity to the counter-psalm's carrier wave. Warp translation. Immediate. Destination. Croyle's Gate. Passenger manifest. Interrogator Sarah Kane. Quarantined. Astropathic communication. Forbidden during passage. Estimated survival probability. Classified. The vow of censure groans at dock, bulkheads rimed with thin frost despite engine heat, while the humid breath of 1,000 voyages transforms into desert air that cuts the throat. I walk the line of families at checkpoints where arbiters scan for mouth shapes, watching a girl cup her hands, as if whispering to a doll, before scanners howl and Medicae sweep her into a hush tent with nutrient slurry. Her mother's lips tremble as if choosing shapes can kill, and perhaps they can. As the ship burns for warp translation, I press my palm against the observation, blisters plasteel window, watching Harrowvale dwindle to ash-colored dot against the void. My breath fogs the surface without conscious will, condensation forming the 13-note sequence in crystalline precision, while the missing third tone scrapes behind my ear, like fingernail on glass. The seed of silence thrums with increasing amplitude, note 13 humming like a distant reactor. Not cold now, but warm, alive, and growing stronger with each parsec we travel toward fresh choir lines that have never learned the weight of weaponized prayer. The counter-psalm spreads through my exhalation like viral architecture, and I am its willing vector, carrying silence toward worlds that still believe devotion is safe. Aboard the vow of censure in warp transit, my narrative fractures into clinical precision, haunted by what nests in my throat like frozen communion wafer. I hear bells that don't ring, bronze throats finding phantom song through ventilation systems, while 13-note sequences echo through corridors where no bells hang. When thoughts drift toward terror and the golden throne, salt hunger floods my mouth despite sealed atmospheric systems, spiritual emptiness that transcends biological appetite and settles in bone marrow like devotional lead shot, silence reef detected ahead. Empyrean density, approaching null state, psychic turbulence, absent, navigation hazard classification, extreme, astropathic communication, suspended by terror and tactical necessity. Ship's astropath, Cornelius, refuses to sing traditional guidance hymns, his chamber sealed and marked with warning sigils, while he whispers through Vox Grill, with theological dread strangling his voice. Something waits in the quiet between prayers, patient as fasting saints, and my thoughts would feed it if I shaped them into liturgical architecture. His terror carries weight that makes the seed in my throat vibrate with sympathetic resonance, harmonic frequencies building toward dangerous amplitude. Military protocols transform the vessel into monastery of enforced quiet, where mess halls echo with nothing but scrape of utensils against metal trays. Crew members mouth gratitude and collapse, cheeks hollowing as invisible hands pinch souls and pull sustenance from flesh through structured devotion. The ship's confessor hangs his crozier beside sealed chapel doors, forbidden to officiate while families weep for silenced faith. Even mechanical prayers become dangerous. Servo skulls emit hymn fragments and immediately power down, machine spirits drained by devotional architecture. Cosmic abstraction reveals the counter-psalm's true nature through fragments of understanding that cut like glass behind my eyes. The ritual was never weapon, but corridor, passage through which something vast has learned to fast in preparation rather than failure. The bioship's starvation was not defeat, but rehearsal, teaching the galaxy's edge how to hunger with mathematical precision, while something patient waits beyond the rim of human comprehension, learning to feast through the fast I have taught it. Condensation freezing in glyphs across bulkheads, 9-point spirals facing different directions, each observation cycle. Atmospheric composition, frankincense, rusted blood, devotional mathematics made manifest. Environmental horror manifests as condensation freezes in glyphs across bulkheads, 9-point spirals that face different directions each time observed, while tracing cathedral floor plans through crystalline formations. The ship's atmosphere grows brittle with dry cold that penetrates environmental systems, frost blooming over surfaces despite engine heat, while metallic taste of starvation coats every breath. Emergency heat packs crumble to ash when activated, molecular bonds dissolving as structured silence draws energy from matter itself. Recurring motifs converge through warp space as 13 notes complete their architecture, the -1 representing the galaxy's pause before consumption. Breath withheld between prayer and feast, silence measured in parsecs, while devotional mathematics propagate through choir lines faster than light. The counter-psalm spreads like viral theology, my exhalation becoming carrier wave for weaponized hunger that transforms faith into fuel for entities that digest cadence rather than matter. I record final containment order to the sector through encrypted data burst, each word weighted with theological necessity. Do not assemble in groups larger than 3. Do not answer bells that ring without ringers. Do not pray where air runs cold or breath makes geometric patterns. Do not complete hymns that begin themselves. The transmission propagates through astropathic networks, where choir masters report similar warnings, arriving before they were sent. The counter-psalm's architecture transcending linear time through devotional mathematics. Starline Theta 7 through Gamma 12, showing progressive luminosity failure. Pattern suggests systematic dimming along choir network routes, propagation speed faster than light through Imperium channels. Corruption manifests as the seed in my throat, vibrates when nearby mouths form worship shapes, resonant frequency, building with each attempted prayer, while I become vector for spreading silence across systems that still believe devotion is safe. My consciousness fragments into geometric patterns that spell names in languages older than human speech, identity dissolving into mathematical equations, while something vast learns to hunger through my breath, teaching the void to say grace with knives laid parallel and cloth folded to ritual thirds. Through observation blisters, I watch stars dimming along a line like lamps doused before procession, their light failing not through stellar death, but through something that feeds on the space between prayers. The galaxy learns to fast with mathematical precision, while devotional architecture spreads through every cathedral, every shrine, every prayer circle where faithful kneel unknowing that their worship has become ammunition for entities that digest faith itself, transforming biological imperative into theological architecture. The vow of censure shudders through warp translation toward Croyle's gate, while I carry the counter-psalm in my throat like frozen heartbeat, knowing each breath propagates weaponized theology through systems that have never learned the weight of silence. My voice has become the road, and something patient follows, learning to feast through the fast I have taught it. In the observation blister's hush, I whisper, "Do not answer when the bells are silent, while my breath writes the 13th note on plasteel glass in crystalline formations that rotate clockwise when observed. And somewhere in the void between stars, something vast and patient begins to stir.